I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a Chicago rabbi is thrust into the national spotlight on Fox News' Bill O'Reilly. It happened this way. Recently, Bill O'Reilly, who hosts the #1 nightly cable news program on Fox News, issued a call to clergymen of all faiths to speak to their congregations about the importance of their contacting the White House and Congress, demanding a response to the radical Islamic threat posed by ISIS. The following night, Bill read from some of the emails he'd received, including one from a Chicago rabbi. Here's a clip from that program and the email from Rabbi Barry Axler of Chicago, Illinois.
Last night, Talking Points called for the American clergy to speak this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday about the moral obligation to protect innocent lives from fanatical killers. Many of the clergy have responded directly to me. Pastor Daniel Kitchell, Norman, Oklahoma. Mr. O'Reilly, your call for the clergy to stand and demand that President Obama lead the way against ISIS is exactly what's needed. This Sunday from the pulpit, I will address this. We are with you. Rabbi Barry Axler, Chicago. Mr. O'Reilly, when Moses stood at the Red Sea with Egyptians charging, he prayed to God. God told him, don't pray, take action. I applaud your call to clergy to encourage the president to act, and I am honored to join the effort.
There you have it, an email from Rabbi Barry Axler. We're on our phones right now from Chicago. We're happy to welcome the rabbi whose email was read by Bill O'Reilly, Barry Axler. And Barry, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark, for having me on your program.
So, first of all, Barry, what motivated you to send your email to Bill O'Reilly?
Well, I saw the segment that you referred to, and I believed in my own heart that we need to do something. We need to take some action. And when Mr. O'Reilly called for clergy this weekend to speak out on a call to action, I thought it was a great idea, and I wanted him to know how I felt, but I wanted him to know how I felt in a biblical sense, using some, biblical examples. And so I used two in my email to him. He used one on the air, but I actually used two in my email to him of examples from the Bible where there is a call to action.
Okay, the first example, of course, is from the Red Sea. What was the other example that didn't make the show?
Sure. So the other example was, I said that when Moses saw the Egyptian officer beating the Hebrew slave, he didn't form a committee to study the root causes of Egyptian anti-Semitism. He acted and he slew the officer.
Very good, Barry. Barry, are you a practicing rabbi with a congregation?
I'm a rabbi without portfolio, Mark. So I do services at a very large retirement home in the Chicago area. I'm a rabbi to cruise lines. I'm a rabbi on call to almost all of the, Chicagoland funeral homes. So that kind of a thing. So I don't have my own congregation. I belong to a very unique congregation in Chicago. It's a modern Orthodox congregation that has no rabbi per se. We have 3 rabbis that belong. We have a very learned lay group. So each of us takes turns leading the service.
Very nice. Sort of like a chavurah of sorts?
Of sorts, but it's a more structured service. I would say it's less a chavurah. It's more of a structured service. It's just lay-led rather than professionally led.
By the way, I want to let our audience know, because we did some, investigation as to who you are. You have done many, many wonderful things in your community, and you're very highly regarded, Barry.
Thank you very much. I consider myself a frontline soldier in the war of Jewish survival, and I've been honored to make a small impact in that regard.
Oh, well, good for you. So if you had a formal pulpit and you were going to speak at a Shabbat morning service in response to, your wanting to answer Bill O'Reilly's call, summarize for me what the essence of your message would be.
That in Judaism, there is a time for prayer, and that there's a call to action as well. So the two examples that I gave, one of the Egyptian officer being slain by Moses. the other of Moses at the Red Sea and his praying to God, and God says, don't pray to me anymore, you take action, would have been two examples. I think the third one that I like very much is when Abraham was talking to God, and then the three strangers came. He said to God, I'm going to put you on hold for a second, and I'm going to go care for those strangers. I'm going to take care of those strangers. And this is a crisis time. I had a professor who once told me, Mark, if you have a rendezvous with destiny, then you better be on time.
Okay.
And with what's going on in the world today, the beheadings, the slayings, Iran, and the possible bomb, and the whole business, we have a rendezvous with destiny, and we better be on time.
Okay, I want to push you just a moment. What's the action you would have asked your congregation to be involved in?
Listen, we're all good Americans. I would have asked my congregants to take pen in hand after Shabbat and write to the president and write to their congressmen and write to their senators and say, talking is fine, conferences on terrorism is fine, but we're the United States of America, and we can't let what happened in Europe in the 30s happen today in the world. And nothing's going to happen without American leadership, and we have to have that leadership.
Obviously, you watch O'Reilly enough to have seen his call and you answered it. Bill O'Reilly keeps saying that he feels the United States has no concerted, organized policy with which it is responding to ISIS and fighting the terrorist threat. And the question that you see everywhere is, should the United States be leading some kind of ground assault against ISIS, whether it's in Turkey whether it's in Syria or in Iraq, or some of the other places that ISIS has gained a foothold and Al-Qaeda is growing, whether it's Yemen or Libya? Is Barry Axler arguing that the United States of America should take literal military action against ISIS? Are you advocating, would you suggest that your congregants write to the White House asking the president to send groups on the ground into Syria or into Iraq to fight ISIS?
Barry Axler is saying yes to that. And the world looks to the United States. Just a couple of examples. Look at what happened after President Obama said that he was going to draw the line in the sand in Syria. That line was passed, and, nothing happened. ISIS was nothing at that point. It was what he called the JV. All of a sudden, when they saw that Obama wasn't serious about his actions, they grew. Just a couple months after Obama did that, what happened in the Ukraine? Okay, Putin first took Crimea, and then he took the Ukraine. He moved in because he was certain nothing was going to happen to him. We are the beacon. We are the beacon in the world, and people look to us. And if this crisis now is going to be solved, we have to lead a coalition. I'm not saying it should all be American forces, but listen, we're talking about armies of Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Syria. It's fine, but it's American forces and American air power that has to lead the way. So that's a long answer to your question. The simple answer is yes.
Okay. Barry, how would you describe yourself politically in general?
Middle right.
Middle right.
Middle to the right.
Okay. So you would be more supportive of a Republican presidential candidate than a Democratic presidential candidate?
I would be.
Okay. In general, there are people who are very upset that the administration is reluctant to refer to the terrorist threat at the moment as Islamic, rather either radical jihad, radical Islamic jihad, radical Islamic terrorism. What's your feeling about the importance of America using the term Islam when it describes the terrorism perpetrated by either ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram, other terrorist groups of this nature?
On the one hand, we have to be careful. Listen, Islam is a religion of about 1 billion people in the world, and most of them are not jihadists, are not terrorists. It's an honorable religion. We have to be careful not to box all of Islam or all Muslims into that category. On the other hand, right, roughly, I think the figure is over 20% of Islam, of the Muslims, are terrorists, are jihadists. So, in a sense, if we're going to call it jihad or Islamic terrorism, I think, as the president did in his conference, by the way, and one has to give him credit for it, he called on the Islamic leaders, as I have done locally as well, to stand up and really denounce what's going on. It may be done in certain quarters, but I don't see it being done on a mass level of Islamic leaders, Islamic congregates standing up and saying, we're opposed to this, we're embarrassed by this, and we're going to do whatever we can to make it stop. So on the one hand, you have to be careful not to lump all of the people who believe in Islam into one category. But on the other hand, you got to call it what it is. When 22% of a billion people, that's a lot of terrorists. You have to also call it what it is.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I don't believe people are saying 22% are involved in terrorism. 22% is the number when the Pew did a poll that showed how many Muslims worldwide favored jihad. And the question about how many are terrorists, somewhere between 5 and 10%. Right. But if you're talking about 1.5 billion people, 5 or 10% is still in the millions. So is the bottom line for you, Barry, that yes, you want America to call it radical Islam or Islamic jihad?
Listen, Americans have been killed. Several of the beheadings have been American citizens, right? Several of the rabbis who were killed in Har Nof had American citizenships. It wasn't a random act when the terrorists went into a kosher supermarket and killed people, and their only sin was they were buying kosher food for the Shabbat. I mean, this is an ongoing kind of a thing, and yes, we have to be concerned, and we have to make sure that this stops now.
I'm sorry, Barry, I don't hear an answer to my question. I was asking you a simple question.
Go ahead.
Do you think the United States and the American administration needs to identify the, quote, enemy as radical Islam or Islamic jihad?
Is that a choice, or is that one and the same? I believe the United States has to recognize
it's one and the same.
The
issue is whether the word Islam is used in describing the current terrorist threat.
They use it. So yes, I believe we have to describe it.
Okay.
They use it that way. They're saying it's Islamic jihadist, Islamic terrorism. If they're saying it, then we should say it.
You do know the administration has been reluctant to use the word Islam in describing the current terrorist threat.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Barry,
I disagree with them on that. Yes.
Have you experienced or seen any anti-Semitism in the Chicago area?
Personally, I have not. No, I know that there have been incidents recently in which synagogues and Jewish homes have had graffiti put on them. So there have been incidents, but I personally have not seen them.
Okay, and again, you have so much experience in the Jewish community in and around Chicago. If somebody says to you, Barry, is anti-Semitism a problem in Chicago? What's your answer?
My answer would be no. I don't believe it is. There are, unfortunately, you have spot incidents. They're very minor. I believe we have to be on the alert. We have to keep our eyes open. But personally, I would say no, that there is not anti-Semitism in the Chicago area.
Okay, and I
mean, we have a Jewish mayor, Mark.
I want to echo your sentiments because while there have been and there probably will be for all eternity, what you called, there are minor incidents and there is graffiti and Every now and then there is even violence directed at somebody who is Jewish. In general, the United States of America is not plagued by anti-Semitism, and the experience of the vast majority of American Jews is that they live in the best environment socially that Jews have ever lived in the diaspora since the beginning of time. And I want to again echo your feeling, because I think it's very important that Jews do not begin to see a certain kind of anti-Semitism lurking in the corners of America, when the reality is it's not an American phenomenon.
That bothers me a great deal, Mark, those groups that do. Listen, I'm not going to mention them by name, but there are groups that make their living off of promoting anti-Semitism, off of saying there's anti-Semitism around, and that's how they function. We live in a great country. Let me just give you one minor example. My wife works for an organization known as the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Mm-hmm. They raise from non-Jews, evangelical Christians, about $120 million a year for Israel. They are the primary funders of bringing Jews from the Ukraine into Israel. So here now you have a situation in our history with all that's gone on, all the pogroms and all the deaths. You have non-Jews saving Jews in the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. I think it's a fantastic thing, and I think it's only in America.
That's a lovely story. Call a vote to your wife. What's her name?
Her name is Maureen Dunn.
Okay, well, Maureen's doing God's work. Good for her. I want to change the question and the focus, Barry. Have you seen or do you know of any Islamophobic action directed at Muslims, members of Islam, in the Chicago community?
I have not.
Okay. Basically, it seems to me, the United States, and again, no one is arguing, Barry, that this is an ideal country. There are always problems. We can always do better. But when you talk about the sweep of a society, it seems to me that when it comes to religious intolerance, it almost doesn't exist in our country. And I wonder the extent to which you agree with me.
Yes.
Okay. Last question, because it relates to in this area. What about black racism, Barry? What do you see in Chicago there? Because it's certainly been a national concern. And the question again is, to what extent is it media hype? To what extent are there real problems which need to be addressed on a social level when it comes to black racism in America?
Let me spend just a little time on that question, because number one, I'm from a city that's given birth to Louis Farrakhan and Jesse Jackson, so we have that on the one hand. However, just a personal story, I was the head of the foundation for the largest inner-city hospital in the city of Chicago. It's in the Austin area. It's 99% African-American. And when I was offered the position, I thought it was a unique challenge. How would the black community accept a white Jew rabbi to work with them in the raising of funds for health services in that community? And I tell you that I was there for 10 years, and it was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. Church is a very important factor within the African American community, and they respect a church leader, quote unquote, someone who's involved in their faith. And I personally, working in that community, knowing leaders throughout Chicago from that community, saw no anti-Semitism and felt no hatred to Jews. On the just the other hand, there was tremendous bridge building. We had for many years here, we had a wonderful African American Jewish Seder that was attended by hundreds of people, and there are ongoing examples of that. So that's my long answer to your question.
Okay, and forgive me, I want you to now, as you end the long answer, what's the bottom line?
The bottom line is that we are a people of conscience. I mean, America gives more charity than any other country in the world, my God, what we do to help other people. That's our raison d'etre. Okay, Tikkun Olam is not only a Jewish concept; it's an American concept, and we care for others. And when we see what's going on, when we see what ISIS is doing, 21 Christians beheaded, and on and on and on. When we see the tragedy that these people are forcing on the world, we want to do something. And I think, I don't know the statistics, but the people that I'm involved with are frustrated that we're not doing enough to end it. And I share in that frustration, and I want to do what I can in order to urge our country to do more to make this thing end.
Okay, I may not have asked the question correctly. What I really was looking for from you was, after we look at the fact that there's no anti-Semitism, and that basically the Islamic community also is not being harassed or discriminated or persecuted in the Chicago area, I asked you to comment on whether you think at the moment it may be safe to be a Jew, it may be safe to be a member of a Muslim, but is it also safe to be an African American in the Chicago community? And to what extent are the problems that we hear about, that I'm told plague Chicago, that there are areas of Chicago where black children are being killed every day? To what extent does Barry Axler feel that while there may not be religious persecution, there still is black racism in Chicago and in America?
I would only differ with the intent of your question. What's happening in some of the black neighborhoods with the black children being killed and others is not a racism thing. It's black on black murder. So I think work has to be done within the black community, including the white community, helping the black community build up families. Build up the family structure, build up the after-school programs, build up whatever we can do to help overcome that black-on-black murder that's going on. It isn't whites killing blacks; it's blacks killing blacks.
Okay,
and I think we have to stop it.
But you're saying that your experience is, within the white community of Chicago, you don't feel there is black racism?
Within the white community in Chicago, I don't feel there's race on the part of whites toward blacks.
Yes.
No, I don't think so. Again, you have the same thing that we just discussed with the anti-Semitism. You'll always have some people who,
Absolutely.
But in general, the answer is no.
So I want to give you a chance to speak for one moment about a project you're also involved in, Barry, that intrigues me, Atonement. Talk about that for a moment.
So there are many Jews out there who want Judaism to be part of their lives, they either have been turned off, it's a money issue, whatever it is, they don't find it within the organized Jewish community, i.e. the synagogues or whatever. They're just not finding it, but they're still out there. So Atonement will be a way for them to reach out and to find that connection in their Jewish life. And you have different groupings. You have young people, for example, who have gone on Birthright, which is one of the most fantastic programs. My son in Israel works for Birthright. But what happens when they come back? The follow-up, the keeping these kids connected is not very strong. Mm-hmm. Atonement could be one vehicle to make that happen. You have people who are in retirement homes, nursing homes, maybe shut-ins, who are longing for some kind of a Shabbat service. They don't get it. Atonement could be the answer to that. There are people who would like to study more, who maybe want to put together a group of people, or who may want to have a personal contact with a rabbi. They don't feel that right now. They don't have that right now. Atonement will help to solve that.
And again, the E in Atonement represents?
Internet. Kind of like, it's a play on words.
Okay, very nice. All right, so we end where we began. How did it feel, Barry, when you turn on, did you know that your email would be read by Bill O'Reilly?
I did not. I wrote it right after that segment appeared. I felt, I had to say something. I wrote it. I showed it to Maureen. I said, this is pretty good. Maybe there's a chance. And then I had no idea. I'm leading a bar bat mitzvah group to Israel in March, early part of April, and I was at the home last night, planning the trip, and then a friend of mine called me on the phone. He said, "You can't believe it, you were on O'Reilly." So it's, he gets what? He gets thousands and thousands of letters.
Yes.
So it was a nice honor that mine was chosen.
That's
I had no idea that it was going to be, and his producers didn't call me and say, "You're going to be on tonight." So it was a complete surprise.
Well, you know what? As I said before, if anybody Googles who Barry Axler is, they'll find that he has done many, many wonderful things for which he is lauded in the Chicago area. But here, Barry, you have your 15 minutes of fame nationally because of Bill O'Reilly. And it's interesting, you're not a congregational rabbi in the typical sense, and I wonder how many rabbis actually responded to Bill that he chose the email, as good as your email was, of a rabbi who doesn't have a congregation. But it was a kick for me to, see a rabbi's name up on Bill O'Reilly's screen, and it was so lovely of you to let me talk to you and get to know a little bit about you and share your insight. You're a lovely guy. I hope we get to meet in person one day.
Me too, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
My conversation with Barry Axler of Chicago, Illinois. And again, 15 seconds of fame because his email was read by Bill O'Reilly on Fox News in response to his call to clergymen all over the United States to mobilize their congregations to support action by the United States against ISIS. My thanks to Serge Goldberg and Sloan Copeland, and our producer for this edition of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.